And when I started the postdoc, which is sort of 3 and a bit years before starting the company, as I arrived in Cambridge, knowing, as I had planned to for a few years at that point, that my intention was to become a professor. My intention was to stay in academia.
What went wrong?
I don't want to be the only one, or I don't want someone else to be the only one who's up at night worrying that something isn't happening when it should be.
So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Tom Simmons, CEO and co-founder of the Supplant Company, who are an innovative UK food tech company, I suppose, using agricultural waste streams and converting them to value-based ingredients. I first saw Tom probably back in 2017 in San Francisco, actually, during the 5-minute early stage startup kind of pitch. And so became aware of the company back then. And it's great all these years later to have you on the show, Tom. So thanks for sparing the time and coming on.
Thank you. Great to be here.
If I was to say to you, when you're, 13 or 14 years old, we're going to be having this conversation in X amount of years, you're a CEO of a startup company doing something as innovative as this, would you have thought that would have been the direction on the journey?
I mean, 13, 14 particularly, I can't quite imagine what I was thinking at 13, 14. I was too busy.
18 then.
On my BMX at that point, I thought I was going to be a professional BMXer at 13. I mean, the story I'd always tell people about, like, how the company came about was, in some ways it was sort of destiny to do what we do. In retrospect, it makes a lot of sense. We work on the science underlying what we do right now is very much built out of plant science. And it was the sort of science that I did as a fellow and a postdoc in Cambridge. And the reason I did that as a fellow and a postdoc in Cambridge is that because I did it as a PhD student in Edinburgh. And the reason I did it as a PhD student in Edinburgh is because I'd done it as a project in Leeds as an undergrad. And the reason I did it in Leeds is because I got dropped into doing it without really anything in my control, because I was I just got placed in it. So in some ways it was pure serendipity that had I not accidentally got put in this project as an undergraduate, many years later wouldn't be running this company right now. This company wouldn't exist because so it all that's sort of the real random serendipity, the whole thing. But in terms of like what I always intended to do, so I just gave you a bit of a background into what's got me to where I was right now: undergraduate biochemistry, PhD biochemistry, postdoc and fellow biochemistry, and then started the business. And when I started the postdoc, which is sort of 3 and a bit years before starting the company, as I arrived in Cambridge, knowing, as I had planned to for a few years at that point, that my intention was to become a professor. My intention was to stay in academia.
What went wrong?
I mean, I can take you through all the twists and turns, but obviously, at some point, the idea of academia felt less appealing to me than the idea of starting a business. But what I would say is that although it seems very different, I mean, obviously, there's many stuff that I do right now that I wouldn't do if I was a professor, and there's many stuff that I would do as a professor that I don't do right now. But the reason I was interested in doing that was because I wanted to make great discoveries, build great inventions. And I was always interested in applied science. Even as an undergraduate, I remember I was, couldn't get interested in a topic unless you told me about how this topic could help cure cancer or could help, clean up the world or whatever, had some applied potential. And as soon as you tell me that, I could get interested in it. So I was always interested in applied stuff. I always wanted to do inventions, always wanted to do discoveries. As an undergrad and a PhD student, then the natural direction that you want to do, that you envisage that being, is staying in academia and running a lab. But so now I'm not in academia, don't run a lab, but we run a company, and the company does do inventions and discoveries, and they do have applied potential. So in some ways, obviously, it's very different. But I'd say that the broad impetus behind what was leading me to want to be a professor is the same as it was now. It didn't really change in foundational; it just changed in slight direction.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, from an impact viewpoint, you wanted to have impact, whether it was as a professor or as a CEO of a company. Tell me, where did all that come from, though? When you think back, you think about the science and you think about kind of connecting it, the application, and about really making these discoveries to change the world, right? Mm-hmm. That's as mission driven as you can get. Where did that kind of really kind of resonate come?
I mean, I was always like a scientist, and I was always that way inclined in all of my school and things like that. Always like things like that. Always like building things, but yeah, honestly, don't really know. Don't know exactly where it all drove from.
Fair enough.
Or I can't give you.
What did your parents do, for instance?
My parents do, yeah. So they're both. So mum was an engineer, dad was an engineer as well. Yeah, I mean, dad had he'll laugh if he hears this. Dad had a workshop, and dad used to do some inventions. Actually, dad invented a few things. He still does a bit now as well. When I was young, so I guess I was around that when I was young. Yeah, and mum was like designing aircraft, is what she used to work on. She was an aerospace engineer. So I suppose that was all around me. I mean, I was never hard pressed to say that this was the reason for why I went down this route, because I don't think I was probably aware of it when I was very young. But I know I'm aware right now. Both sides of my family did run businesses prior to sort of like my parents' generation, actually. So mum's side of the family ran, funnily enough, a confectionery company. So they're on Merseyside. They had ran a company that made, the thing I can remember is custard powder.
Right.
So my mum had like custard powder bags framed in the kitchen at home. So that was on mum's side. And then on dad's side, they ran a company that made prams, like babies' prams, but at the time called perambulators. So Simmons perambulators. And the sort of claim to fame for that one was that I think Queen Elizabeth was carried around in a Simmons perambulator when she was a baby years ago. So I think is it King George at the time? There's a photo of King George with a Simmons perambulator and the Queen in it. That was like well before my time. Both those companies weren't really around by the time I was born. So but I suppose there's some family heritage as well.
Fascinating. Claim to fame. Sure. Tell us about Supplant and the Supplant Company, and I'm really interested to hear about some of the challenges that your company solved.
We are a ingredient platform and food ingredient platform. We make develop, science, and manufacture and sell ingredients, as you said, uniquely from agricultural side streams. So the most abundant stuff, the most wasted stuff produced on farms is not the grain and the bean and the seeds and the sugar and the starch. Rather, it's the structural parts of plants, the cobs and the husks and the stems and the stalks and the hulls. There's more than twice of this on the planet than all of the actual crop-based food that's produced worldwide. So really huge amounts of this stuff. And we develop science to make value-add ingredients from these. And the first ingredient that we launched is an ingredient to replace sugar in the food system. So it's really a bulk replacer for sugar, especially in food. So really focus in food as opposed to drinks, trying to enable sugar reduction in mainstream food in a way that's been possible for drinks for 40 years, and yet still is not possible in mainstream food products now. Currently, we make it from corn cobs. It's an enzyme-based process. We basically break down corn cobs, and what comes out the other end is sugars that derive from the fiber that was in the corn cob and can be used to replace sugar in food categories, but still behaves in your body like fiber originally does. So still low calorie like fiber, still low glycemic like fiber, still prebiotic like fiber. And we think not only can we do sugar reduction in mainstream food this way, but this is really the only way you'll ever be able to do bulk sugar replacement in food applications. And the simple reason for that is, I'll finish by telling you the simple reason for that, is that if you want to replace sugar mainstream across the food system, obviously one of the prerequisites you need if you're going to manufacture an ingredient is you need a raw material that's more abundant and cheaper than sugar. If you start with a raw material that's less abundant or more expensive than sugar, you're not going to be able to have a supply chain that can really deliver mainstream sugar replacement. And there's nothing more abundant and cheaper than sugar inside the food system. It's like the cheapest thing out there. So you've got to go outside to the parts of the crops that don't actually are sort of abandoned before we start calling this stuff food. So yeah, cobs, husks, stems, stalks, hulls. It really is the only way we're ever going to be able to do sugar across mainstream categories, sugar reduction across mainstream categories.
Tell me what normally happens to all the corn cobs then? Is it normally sold or put into the animal kind of applications, or how do the companies normally dispose what they do with that?
there's tons of the stuff, and there's lots of different types of it. So it's hard to give you one single answer for that. But for sure, it'd be wrong to say that nothing is ever finds any other application. But equally, as I say, a lot of it really is just wasted. So yeah, it depends on a case by case basis. And like some of the low value applications these things are used for is, yeah, as you say, some can go into animal feed, some might go into animal bedding or something like that. But as I say, it's all made out of dietary fiber from a nutritional perspective, and so it's the one macronutrient that Westerners don't get enough of. We all get enough of the rest of it. So it's a really great opportunity to bring into the food system. And so, for example, right now where we've sourced, for example, wheat straw, we source from the Midwest, and that's from a place that's processing already. The corn cobs right now we've taken from a canning facility, a place where the head of a corn is brought on, the seeds are all stripped off. That's what the people want, and then cobs are produced on site at this facility as a sort of cleaned up cob, ready to be used, or otherwise to be thrown away or burned. Oat hulls likewise are from an oat pressing facility, so the whole grain is brought in, the hull is stripped off, and the seed is taken for porridge or for oat milk or whatever, and the waste is collected on site. And so we've sort of gone to those raw materials for the time being, is where it's been taken off the farm already, it's gone to a facility, it's been collected. And the nice thing about that for us, of course, is it's collected already, it's in one place, it's cleaner than if it's right at the farm. And it also, from a sustainability perspective, we're taking it from a place where it's already, we're not going and having to put together new supply chains already, so it's better on that front as well. If at scale, you could go back to the farm, and quite a lot of this stuff really is just left on farms and rots on fields. But for the time being, that's what we do.
It's so neat, isn't it? It's such a neat circular kind of solution. Tell me, I remember tasting I think it was a muffin or a cookie back in San Francisco when you were exhibiting in March, and I remember it was it was really nice tasting. How was the taste profile? We always hear about the challenges with sugar reduction, right, and taste, and a couple of things: taste profiles, and then the challenge with some companies trying to fill in. If you've got a real powerful sweetener, for instance, trying to fill in the gap with food applications as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our ingredient is really a bulk replacement for sugar. So that's why we're focusing on food rather than drink. So what we've done really, really well with it, aside from, as I say, having a supply chain and an approach that can really uniquely scale to do mainstream sugar reduction, it just functionally performs the physical properties of sugar really well, which is sort of what you're getting at in terms of the bulking, filling out. So sugar has, depending on who you talk to, 6 to 12 different roles inside food. So there's sweetness, of course, which everyone thinks of, but there's also texture, binding, crystallization, caramelization, water retention, things like that. There's a range of different physical properties, and those are the things that really define what food products look like. So the example I always give to people is, as opposed to in drinks, where the amount of sugar in a drink defines the sweetness of the drink, and sort of that's almost all it is. It's not entirely true, but in 95% of the truth, it's just about sweetness. Whereas in a dough, like a bakery dough, the amount of sugar that goes into that dough not only defines how sweet the dough is going to be, but also defines whether that dough is going to be a cookie or a cake or a croissant or a biscuit when it's baked. So it dictates the physics of the product as well as the sweetness. And so our ingredient really, really faithfully mimics the physical properties of sugar really well. Browns like it's supposed to, holds water like it's supposed to, etc. On the sweetness thing, and so on the flavor thing, yes, it's just a sort of mild, no aftertaste. In terms of sweetness, it is less sweet than sugar. So if you eat it on its own, you can tell it's less sweet than sugar. And so that's where we sort of sit as this sort of unique approach to solve the unsolved problem in food, which is bulking at scale. But less sweet than sugar. And so the way we tend to work with most companies is we're not doing 100% replacement. We do typically, for almost all the companies we work with, we're in the region of 50%, maybe a bit more than 50% sugar replacement across categories. So all the products you would have tried would have been about 50% less cane sugar or coconut sugar or whatever the sugar is, and 50% our ingredient, Supplant, sugars from fiber. And that's the way we work, and we can make products that look and feel and taste like they're supposed to at that sort of range.
Yeah, great. And where has the where's the company got to then in terms of Well, in fact, first of all, maybe tell me a little bit about, when you think about your vision. I mean, it sounds like a really neat kind of technology. Solves a great solution. What's your dreams and hopes for the company?
So I think, as I say, I think on those ingredients, so the first ingredient is an ingredient to replace sugar. Second ingredient we launched earlier this year does the exact same thing for sugar, but does for starch. So we can do savory products as well as sweet products. And the vision for those, as well as basically everything we want to do, is to really address bulk applications in consumer products. And so the scope of them is really the scope of being the most abundant things out there in the food system. And so, really, really big market opportunities, as well as really, really big social impact and climate impact opportunities. We think like the basic premise, if you really try and abstract it, is big food companies, but big consumer companies across the board. So not just Kraft, but also Unilever, which does food as well as cosmetics and home care and personal care. These companies have all made big commitments over the last few years to various different impact metrics, and they all define them in different ways. But the standard ones, net zero and low sugar and looking after the rainforest and less land use and all these sort of things. And they've all made different ones in various ways, but there's some very common ones. Net zero is a very common one, for example. And so they've made commitments to these and put some plans together, but it's not entirely clear exactly how these will be delivered on. And one of the core things that's really going to help that is ingredient innovation, because ingredients in these things are one of the core things that causes certainly health issues and climate issues. And especially the consistent thing across all those is that some of the ingredients that cause the most impact on health and the most impact on climate are bulk ingredients. You can see the connection there. It's these bulk ingredients in food, like sugar is a great example, but also across other consumer categories that are the main causes of health and climate problems. So sugar is a great example. Obviously, it's potentially the major nutritional issue in the world right now. From a climate perspective, it's the number one source of biodiversity loss globally, is what the WWF say. So it's a major climate impact. And then from a business perspective, it's just these major, massive market opportunities if you can find ways of making replacements for them. And as I say, at least as sugar as an example, if you want to replace sugar from mainstream across the food system, you really need to use this raw material that we're using right now, and basically no one is. And so we think that the market opportunity and the impact opportunity for each ingredient is really huge. And then on top of that, there's the scope to do in the future lots and lots and lots of different ingredients that cover the consumer space. For the time being, we've got two, and we're going to focus on those two because it's enough of a challenge rolling those out.
So it's the starches and the sweeteners.
Correct. So sugar replacement, starch replacement. Yeah.
Tell me though, with the sugar, I get the obesity crisis and the fact that your particular replacement is a fiber, so it's a healthier option, right? As well as a more sustainable option. With starches, how does that work? Is it healthier, or is it more just from a sustainability kind of net zero?
Yeah, it's basically the same premise. So the core health benefits of the sugar replacement are low calorie, low glycemic prebiotic, and so it's basically the same for the starch replacement. It's low calorie, low glycemic prebiotic. And similar for climate, less emissions, less land use. Basically, everything we do, there's almost no land use because we take stuff that's grown on land that's already being grown on. So there's no net increase in land use at all. And then also for each, and probably more so this for the starch than for the sugar, just from a conceptual perspective, we can. There's a major sort of food security angle on this as well. We can, or food equity, you might say, from a different perspective. We can make more food from the same amount of land. We can potentially double the amount of tonnage of food that's produced from an acre of land by using the bit that isn't currently used.
Great, great. And just thinking about a little bit when you were saying about your some of your studies and some of the work you were doing prior to supplement. What was the work that you were doing around the identification of this particular enzyme then that breaks it down? Is that where the scientific kind of discovery was?
So it wasn't. And actually, go a bit back to the story of how the company got started. it's really more about the desire to invent things and do impactful things than it was about this particular thing. So there certainly is a connection. So my research was always technically on plant cell walls is what I was researching. So the wall around a cell of a plant, and particularly the enzymes that work on those. But the application that I was really concerned with as a PhD and as a postdoc was actually renewable materials, renewable chemicals, biofuels. These are the sort of things that we would write into the grant applications at the time. So that was sort of the broad application potential. So, food is obviously part of that, and I was working on sugars and fibers and things like that. So it's obviously connected to food, but it was really the scientific area that was being developed was outside of the purview of most food scientists. So in many ways, that's one of the reasons why we've done something new that no one else has done before. It's a really robust area of science, but it's sort of just outside the realms of how food scientists would tend to approach a problem, which I think is one of the reasons why the current solutions for sugar reduction that they're developed by the food industry actually haven't been able to address the applications they've wanted to, because they're sort of constrained in that way. But as I say, despite that, it really wasn't obvious that the company would be a sugar company. And actually the company was, I was working on the companies probably since first idea to start a company was probably like in 2015, probably in the second half of 2015. And then I've fiddled around in various ways on a sort of part-time basis for quite a long time. And it wasn't until Feb 2017 that the company was incorporated. But even then, it was incorporated on a different idea, actually. And it wasn't until the end of 2017 that we really settled on sugar being the first idea. So it was really, really round the houses to get to where we got, and it really, really wasn't obvious. But obviously it is absolutely informed by like almost a decade that I was in academia prior to that. It was definitely the science that I'd studied at the time, defined the problem and solution, but didn't invent something at the university and take it out, for example. There was no specific IP that was brought to start the company.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. And what about scale-wise? You talk about bulk. Give me some sense of, normally we hear about, early stage companies really going from the lab and, really struggling with some of that scale and crossing that valley of death, as it were. So when you talk about bulk, and you've got a very ambitious plan here to replace, such bulk ingredients, what kind of scale can you take this to?
So the scale that it can be taken to is, as I say, as big as all of the food industry currently. There's twice as much of these things at this cobs and husks and stems and stalks and hulls as all of the rest of the food that's in the food system right now. So the scope is as big as, there's no real limitation to how big it could be from that perspective. It won't surprise you if I let it out the bag that we're not there just yet. But the potential is really huge and really uniquely possible with this raw material.
Yeah, and that sounds really exciting. And tell me though, it's interesting, right? The last 7 years or so, 7 years as I suppose, founder and a CEO. I suppose when you reflect on that journey, what have been the real challenges? The biggest kind of steps or challenges that you've needed to kind of take as a CEO.
The biggest challenges as a CEO, I suppose. The big thing starting out was working out what the heck we're going to do. We could have done stuff a lot smoother. And I think, in many ways, we've done stuff quite, like I know compared to other companies doing the sort of stuff we're doing, like bringing brand new ingredients to market, working out all the steps you've got to go through to get there, commercial, regulation, IP, manufacturing. We've done pretty well, and we've done it quite fast. We brought 2 out fast, and a lot of people bring 1, and with a lot less cash in many cases. That said, if I know 5 years ago what I knew now, we could have almost gone to market on day one without trying too much. So there's tons of stuff that we could have done a lot easier. I think definitely would have focused a lot more on selling sooner. The upshot to selling, to taking a bit of time to get our ducks in a row before we started selling is our IP situation is really quite strong. Partly it's because we were so conservative at the start about what we were doing, and so the upshot to that is you don't divulge your secrets until you protected them all. That was a virtue. But the very first sales pitches we do were like, I'm not telling you what it is. I'm not telling you how you make it. not telling you what the benefits are. Do you want to buy it? And obviously
right. It's a challenge, right? It's a challenge.
That's quite a hard pitch to do, unfortunately. But yeah, and so but yeah, I definitely would have focused on getting things to market sooner. I think like probably the big challenge, especially like coming from an academic perspective, is team. And that's obviously having a good team, which I think we have a good team here, is obviously hard and but also super important. And it's probably something that coming from the academic side of things, very well versed in the science, things like. But academia is a solo, game. It's you tend to do your own projects. If you do work in teams, they're fairly small teams, and everyone has their own very clearly defined thing. And there's much less of a role of an idea of everyone working in specific teams where everything's collaborative. And obviously when teams are going well and and everything's really good and things like that, it's very rewarding. And when they're not, that's probably the most painful things. So probably the most challenging thing of it all is everything around team.
Yeah, I suppose with that you're hiring people, you're having functions where you might not be the expert necessarily, right? So that's probably a big difference as well, right? When you're
and maybe it's more in your wheelhouse, but marketing was always this thing for me, like, what the heck is this marketing thing about? Who are they, what are these people doing? And because of course it means different things to everyone you talk to, and so some people marketing is very analytical, and some people it's all brand work and it's pure sort of creative. And so learning to understand what that means, and I certainly wouldn't say I'm an expert at all, but certainly know a lot more than I used to. But the same thing for basically every role we've done, we've had to hire people not really knowing exactly what the role is they're doing, waiting for them to define the role, realizing what's good and what's bad, tweaking it. And so definitely have a lot better of an idea, the mechanics of a business from that. I mean, I suppose one reflection from that is I remember business school, one of the things they would always get you to do is a business model canvas. Do you know that thing?
Yeah.
And that was, I remember at the time being like, I have no idea what the heck any of this stuff is, and there was like, I can't remember all the different parts of the business model canvas, but it was like partners and marketing and channels and things. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what any of this stuff is. And so definitely at this point, as a product of having gone through it, have a much better feel for what we need, as well as what the general approaches in these things. But it's a painful process to go through to get there.
Interesting, isn't it? But also, I would have thought such an innovative company disrupting a marketplace, telling a story, becomes so important, doesn't it? Because there's so many incumbent players in this space, and it's a challenge to shift stuff, and it's no doubt a challenge to shift big food manufacturers.
You're saying as regards the marketing of the product, you mean?
The marketing of the company, the mission, the values, the vision, why it's different, and bringing people on the journey.
No, I think that's obviously true. And obviously the story that people see, I mean, definitely right now, I think like the way it's presented the way we present it is still definitely needs honing and things like that. And I think definitely like, building out the brand presence is a job we need to do for sure. I think sort of underlying that, one of the, a lot of the work that I think is good that we've done on that front is just defining like, there's a whole load of quite complex science underlying this. You need to find a way of communicating that which is accurate in that you're not misleading people. Of course, you don't want to do that, but equally understandable. It can't be so complex that it's technically accurate but no one understands it. It needs to be regulatorily permissible. You need to be able to say these things, and then it needs to be appealing in both to a consumer and to employees. And so I think a lot of the work we've done underlying that, which is sort of partly what I say to you, right now, and partly what I say whenever I do a talk or a presentation is I think we've done quite a lot of good work on setting the foundations for that, and then on top of that, it's still a job to be done to build what is actually going to be the endpoint consumer brand off the top of it. But it's certainly changed a lot, and even if I spoke to you a year ago, a lot of the terminology that we've come to use didn't exist. So it really is quite a recent thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, no, your website's changed recently, right? Because which is
It's going to change. It's going to change again soon. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of constantly in flux to some extent, and but yeah, and it's we do. I would say, because the way we're going to bring the product to market, that's definitely even we did our A round 2 ago now, yeah, something like that, and the commercial plan was a lot more, it was different, and it was a lot more opaque, and now it's a lot more concrete. And then of course the way you're going to present yourself to the world, it's entirely contingent on how you're actually going to sell what you're going to sell. Are you going to make consumer products? Are you going to sell ingredients? Are you going to sell products or into food service or whatever? And so the way you're going to show up is going to change a lot. And so the real estate you have to play with, and then the types of verbiage you want to use has to be built from that. And so it's really, you want to nail down the commercial, then come back to the whole brand piece and work out how you're going to put that out. And so it's, and as we keep making steps forward on the commercial landscape, I'm sure we will tweak it, but it's getting a lot more concrete now. It's not going to, the base way in which we present ourselves is probably not going to change, hopefully, that much more. But probably first time we met you, we had a different name as well. So we've also changed names a few times as well. So yeah, a lot of that is getting more steady at this point.
Yeah, I remember you had a glass of orange juice and you were proving something out on the stage. It was in San Francisco, I think it was.
What was that? I can't remember.
I remember it was like a 5-minute pitch. And
it was like a elevator pitch or something. Well, yeah, it was a fast pitch on stage. I remember.
Definitely before your Series A, for sure.
Oh yeah, I think it was 2018. I think it was San Francisco, presumably March 2018.
Yeah. But tell me though, on that, with everything you said, when it comes to raising money, what's that like as a process for you? And clearly a major aspect to the role, but what are your thoughts and views on that part of the job?
It's obviously a big part. It's obviously, that's maybe the stressful parts of the job are team and fundraising, because the whole company relies on the fundraising, and it relies on single document, people signing documents, once, and so it's all very binary. So I mean, our fund, we were in Y Combinator summer 2018, and so we raised straight off the back of that when in the early days, and so that was super helpful in getting the company off the ground. If wouldn't have been able to raise as much money as we did or as fast as we did coming out of there than if we stayed in the UK, probably, I think, especially at the time, and doing the sort of stuff we were doing. So that was very helpful. And then we've been fortunate. We've got quite a few big sort of established investors that are supportive. So that's been very helpful.
Investors as well. I found that quite interesting. I wasn't sure of the connection with you being based in the UK, but I noticed there were a couple of large, US firms, as it were. So I was almost surprised. Over there, as it were.
As I say, we were in Y Combinator summer 2018. So we lived in California based in California for about 3 months. We lived in Berkeley, actually. And so all the initial money was raised over in the US, but then immediately came back to the UK. And why did we come back to the UK? Don't know actually. I mean, it was genuinely a discussion at the time. Should we stay over there? But I think much preferred to come back to the UK. But as a result of that, a lot of our early investors are based out in Silicon Valley. As a result of it, and then the subsequent funding rounds have always involved certainly speaking to investors outside of the UK. So I mean, so we're based in Cambridgeshire, and a lot of Cambridge companies raise money from. There's like a group of investors in Cambridge. We've actually never raised money in Cambridge. We have got a few investors in London, but the vast bulk of it has come from outside, and mainly the US.
Fascinating. And how do you find the Cambridge ecosystem? I mean, clearly a lot of biotech and a lot of life sciences broadly. How does it serve you in the food tech ingredient innovation space?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's not a huge amount of food tech people, I suppose, but I mean, we tend to hire scientists more than specifically food scientists when it's those technical roles. So Cambridge is broadly good for that. I mean, it's still a small place, really. It's like 100,000 people, so it's not massive. And we've definitely been as we've done recruitment, a lot of people are that we spoke to at least are based in London, and so quite a handful of people right now commute in every day from London. So definitely, I can see the virtues of being next to a multi-million population city. But yeah, no, Cambridge is very good, and definitely happy to be here. Not trying to escape away anytime soon.
Yeah, no, great. So, what does it mean if you work for Supplant? When you are hiring, what are you looking for? I mean, what makes an ideal fit for a candidate to come and join Supplant?
What we always want is people who are gonna, is accountability the right word, or ownership? We want people who are really gonna. I mean, obviously, be bright, sharp people is really important for a lot of what we do, and that obviously holds for the technical roles, but also for across the whole board, because you really need to think across a whole load of dimensions when we're doing all the things we're doing, because there's so many. Commercial obviously needs to be aware of scientific limitations and manufacturing limitations and the regulatory landscape and things like that. So obviously, being sharp and being switched on and broadly clever is a prerequisite. But I think ownership is probably the biggest thing we try and look out for when we're picking things up. It's such a key thing. People, I don't want to be the only one, or I don't want someone else to be the only one who's up at night worrying that something isn't happening when it should be. We want broadly everyone to feel a sense of ownership, especially over the things they're owning, but broadly over what we're doing to get things moving. So definitely, as probably ownership is one of the big ones. But there's a bunch of things, and I really want people to feel like definitely they enjoy the work, and I think they definitely, the team we have right now, that's definitely the impression you get is everyone is really happy and enjoys it, but want everyone to feel a sense of mission, and that's obviously related to the accountability thing. It matters if we get things over the line. It matters if quality of work starts slipping. It matters if things are done well. And that's sort of something where it's quite obviously there's a lot of stuff you can train people for, and a lot of stuff you can educate them for, but you can't really train for caring. And taking ownership and being accountable and things like that. And so that's one of the big things we're looking out for when we're interviewing.
No, great stuff. And look, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on and talking through the journey. It's been fascinating, and I wish you all the very best, for the future.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, it was really good.